Hey y'all, it's Cam again. So this will be video number 4. This is the Jeffrey Epstein indictment dismissal, and they're allowing a lot of the victims to speak at this point. Some of the attorneys, there's like 3 or 4 sets of attorneys that have come forward with either statements from their client or the clients themselves are actually speaking in court. But this was following his August 19th, his August of 2019 death. Okay, so anyway, we're going to start here on page 68. So this is Miss Gibbs. She's one of the attorneys. She says, one more, a statement of Jane Doe 8. In the past few weeks, I have had to reflect on my interaction with Jeffrey Epstein and realize that though I have yet to put it all behind me, I'm still a victim. I say this because I have to come to terms with it in an effort to truly get past the abuse I suffered at the hands of Epstein. Pursuing criminal penalties against him and having an opportunity to address the egregious crimes he committed against me and other young women would have helped my recovery process. This all came to an abrupt halt when he took his own life. This point of disclosure is lost. I cannot say that I'm pleased he committed suicide, but I am at peace knowing he will not be able to hurt anyone else. However, a sad truth remains. I, along with other people, will never have an answer as to why. I will never have an apology for the wrongdoing, and most importantly, Epstein will not be justly sentenced for his crimes. Now I sit in my home questioning the well-being of those girls like myself. In choosing death, Epstein denied everyone justice. Any efforts to protect Epstein's name and legacy send a message to the victims that he wins and that he is untouchable. I understand his case may be dismissed or closed, but this makes me feel as though I and anyone else who fell prey to his hands simply do not matter. I ask that you very seriously consider the final decision because it will undoubtedly affect all other facets of this case, including any future charges brought against the recruiters or third parties to his crimes. I do not want the narrative to be those poor girls. I want to send a message to anyone who would consider engaging in similar acts to think twice beforehand. I want some sort of closure for those of us who relive those horrible moments where we were assaulted, abused, and taken advantage of by Epstein. You have the opportunity to help us seek that closure. I appreciate your time and consideration and ask for your continued support in dealing with this case to illustrate that we, Epstein's victims, do matter. Sincerely, Jane Doe 8. On behalf of Lisa Bloom and the Bloom firm, thank you, Your Honor. The court, thank you, Ms. Gibbs. Did we have any other victims counsel or victims? Miss Allred? Miss Allred, good morning, Your Honor. The court, good morning. How are you? Miss Allred, fine, thank you. Allred, Morocco, and Goldberg by Gloria Allred. Gloria, Gloria, and then Allred. Your Honor, thank you so much for this opportunity to afford the victims their voice because many of them have never spoken before. They never spoke in Florida. They never spoke anywhere. They never told their mother. They never told their father. They never told their family members. This is an opportunity for them to be heard. We thank you for that. Your Honor, for 43 years, my firm has been the leading women's rights private law firm in the United States. We have helped thousands of victims, and I, as an officer of the court and as a believer in the system, had tried to encourage the victims to have confidence in the system that should provide them access to justice, that should help them to assert and vindicate their rights in a court of law. It has been increasingly difficult in this case for me to say to my clients that they should have confidence in the system of justice given what has occurred in this case, the people versus Jeffrey Epstein. Having said that, I'm encouraged by the fact that this court essentially, in an unprecedented situation where the defendant is deceased, is still affording these victims an opportunity to be heard. We thank you for that. It is some encouragement. Your Honor, you also asked, do our clients wish to be heard in reference to some of the issues that have been raised this morning, including what should happen into this case? Your Honor, There has been a suggestion that the court should investigate the circumstances of the death of Mr. Epstein. I'm not going to repeat the arguments made by counsel, but I would say that if there is jurisdiction, and I know that is a legal issue, which has been previously argued, that certainly it would increase the confidence of my clients, not just my clients, but victims all over. And some are, by the way, located in other parts of the world, to have the court oversee the investigation. We are encouraged by the sensitivity of the attorneys for the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York in the investigation that is going on with the separate team. However, and of course, the defense is also conducting its own investigation. But I do think the greatest confidence would be if the court in some way would be able to oversee an investigation, because the court is a neutral party. And although the court certainly has a certainly has a stake in finding out what happened to defendants who are in the custody of the federal system and who should be there to face the prosecutors and the charges against them, but now are not, because clearly the system has failed. And the United States Attorney has admitted that. Even before he admitted that, everybody knows the system failed. Failed the victims, failed the court, failed everyone. In any event, Your Honor, having seen so many thousands of victims of gender violence, sex harassment, sexual assault, I've dealt with child sex trafficking, child molesters. I mean, this is a unique case because there are so many victims and so many failures of the system. At this point, what we would really ask for is not just your words, but words have been helpful, but deeds, and that is very important. In addition, I would like to say throughout this case is the running theme of the betrayal of trust by Jeffrey Epstein, betrayal of trust by the system, and betrayal of trust to the victims who had the right to justice. In the Crime Victims' Rights Act, or Crime Victims Act, should not just be words, it should be or should have meaning, and it should be enforced. In essence, we're asking, although you may need to, of course, grant this motion to dismiss, I think because the court has shown sensitivity to victims and victims' needs, if there is a way to at least keep the record open so that victims who have not been able to physically present in the courtroom today and who have not been able to submit to the court any letters, victim impact, and who have not been able to secure attorneys or speak to attorneys yet. So, for example, I'll still hearing from victims who have not been able to meet with yet because they just recently are now contacting me. So if they could submit, at least for the record, their victim impact statements, that I think would be a very important assistance to them. So that would be at least they would know that they are sharing, or what they're sharing is on the record. This is confusing. I'm sorry. I keep messing it up. Okay, so in summary, I would say that they are looking forward to the very serious investigation by the United States attorney who may have conspired in this case, and that is very helpful. And we're hoping that everyone who may have a role to this criminal prosecution will submit that evidence. This is about power. This is about many victims having lived in fear of the rich, the powerful, the famous, fear that the system will not afford them justice. So fear of not coming forward, and fear, of course, is a weapon that the rich, powerful, famous, and sexual predators use to silence the victims. But that is gone for a lot of the victims because they refuse to suffer in silence. Finally, it does take courage to speak truth to power. We thank this honorable court for giving these victims a voice. We thank them even after the death of the defendant for showing respect for the victims, allowing them dignity, allowing them a voice. We do want truth. We do want justice. We do want accountability. And we do want those conspirators to face the justice system. Your Honor, right now, we have two of our clients who would like to address the court. And the court, sure. Ms. Allred, then I have a couple of statements on victims who did not wish to address the court. As they come up, will give them the opportunity to say either their name or Jane Doe. By the way, thank you, Your Honor, for allowing some of these victims to be called Jane Doe. What number the court affords to them will accept whatever that is. Thank you. The court, we're up to 9. Miss Allred, thank you. Miss Davies, hello. My name is Tila Davies. That is Teala, excuse me, Davies. I was going to start this statement by saying that I was a victim of Jeffrey Epstein, but that's not the case. I'm still a victim of Jeffrey Epstein. I'm still a victim because the fear of not being heard stopped me from telling my story for so many years. This lingering fear almost stopped me from attending this monumental movement of strength and power. I'm still a victim because I'm fearful for my daughters and everyone's daughters. I'm fearful for their future in this world where there are predators in power, a world where people can afford or can avoid justice if their pockets run deep enough. I'm still a victim because a 17-year-old Tila was manipulated into thinking she had found someone who cared, someone who wanted to help. Jeffrey knew I had nowhere to go. He knew I was vulnerable, and he took advantage of that poor girl who will never be the same. I cannot eat at the thought that Jeffrey Epstein, I cannot eat at the thought of Jeffrey Epstein not serving the time he needed to realize the pain and suffering he caused so many vulnerable young girls. He thought he was untouchable, and honestly, so did I. I thought he was the most powerful person I would ever meet. But the end is here, and here I stand becoming more powerful than he will ever be. Thank you. The court, thank you. Jane Doe, Jane Doe. In 2004, when I was 15 years old, I flew on Jeffrey Epstein's plane to Zorro Ranch, where I was sexually molested by him for many hours. What I remember most vividly was him explaining to me how beneficial the experience was for me and how much he was helping me to grow. Yikes. I remember feeling so small and powerless, especially after he positioned me by laying me on his floor so that I was confronted by all the framed photographs on his dresser of him smiling with wealthy celebrities and politicians. After he finished with me, he told me to describe in detail how good my first sexual experience felt. That was the first of many lies I was forced to carry for him, the weight of which proliferated my trauma. I felt powerless, not merely because one man wanted to strip me of my innocence, but because I was the victim of a system that just enfranchised human beings, making them vulnerable to pedophilic exploitation. As unjust as what happened to me was, I believe that experience to be a symptom of insidious and pathological violence that extreme wealth yields, a violence which ultimately stays hidden through channels of extreme power that serve it. I first identified with this feeling the night after I was molested by Epstein, when another girl and I took out 2 of his ATVs and raised them. I guess you're saying raced them across the mesa. I crashed mine and expressed my concern to the other girl of getting in trouble, which she replied to me, "Don't worry, no one gets in trouble for anything here." Even as a child, I understood in a sad and precocious way what I hoped we have the ability of changing now. Even though Epstein is dead, there's still justice to be brought for the crimes we felt powerless against concealing for him and the system that supported him for all these years. Thank you, the court. You're very welcome. Miss Allred, thank you. Your Honor, may it please the court, I would like to read a statement from Jane Doe, my client, who is present in court but requested that I read it. We only have one opportunity at childhood, one opportunity to develop, one opportunity to find direction for our lives. Jeffrey Epstein robbed and denied me at each opportunity he had. I came from a small Texas town not far from the New Mexico border. My mother died when I was 11 after suffering from cancer for many years. My father was devastated as were my siblings and I. My father was saddled with debt. My only hope for college was to get a scholarship. When I was 15, I was a blossoming freshman in high school and was trying to carry on my mother's dream. She wanted me to master the violin. After school, I would often go to a mall in a nearby city. A lady approached me and saw I had a violin case with me and asked if I was any good. We talked about the violin, my family, and why I had clothes that looked like hand-me-downs. The lady told me she works for a very rich man who had a home close by and that he would pay to hear me play. I was told that if I could get away, she could arrange for transportation to and from his place and have me back before anyone knew I was gone. After some hesitation, I agreed. This decision was the beginning of the end of my childhood. The man who only identified himself as Jay or Jeff had asked if I would give him a massage, and over 4 visits eventually progressed to forced oral copulation. The money he gave me further placed my young soul into a perverse sense of hell. I was so utterly disgusted with myself and what he did to me that I stopped going to see him. I had documented the events with the Texas Rape Crisis Center about the man I knew now as Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein targeted and took advantage of me, a young girl whose mother had recently died a horrific death and whose family structure had deteriorated. His actions placed me, a young girl, into a downward spiral to the point where I purchased a gun, drove myself to an isolated place to end my suffering. A voice that it could only have been from my mother told me, quote, I'm not a victim, or I'm not the victim, I'm the victor, and I dare not pull the trigger. I returned the gun days later. Epstein is a coward. He lived his life leeching off the souls of inspiring young girls due to the fact that he can never know how it feels to inspire to live. Like a leech, once Epstein had his fill, he would unlatch and seek out another victim. The only sense of justice I have hoped to see was Epstein being sentenced. However, Epstein died as he lived, taking the easy way out without any responsibility. Your Honor, the next statement is also a statement of Jane Doe. May it please the court. I was a 16-year-old virgin when Jeffrey Epstein first raped me. I was naive and gullible. He was a pillar of finance and a giant in the world that I was an insignificant part of. I was so impressed that this great man would even talk to me and impart any of his wisdom on me. I gladly jumped at the chance to meet him again. When he told me how impressed he was with my personal story and maturity for my age, when I was in his presence, he made an effort to call celebrities and influential people on speakerphone, like award winning actresses and supermodels who always answered his calls. Sadly, I was impressed. He was friends with former and future heads of state and every other fixture in the New York social scene and beyond. He knew important people in my own world that I looked up to and revered, but he spoke about them like they were sweet distractions far beneath his stature. He could easily reach down from his position and influence the people directly involved with my daily life and future prosperity. I was the perfect victim. My whole life was extremely turbulent, but one of my mother's greatest wishes was that all her children would graduate from respectable universities. He promised me that he would write me a letter of recommendation for Harvard if I got the grades and scores needed for admission. His word was worth a lot, he assured me, as he was in the midst of funding and leading Harvard's studies on the human brain, and the president was his friend. The fact that all of you already know these next details, which all shared, should ignite fire instead of induce the complacency they did in the past when heard repeatedly over the years. But yes, an innocent massage turns sexual almost immediately. Here, come help me with a kink in my shoulder while we finish our discussion. A large vibrator and a couple of $100, disgust and dirty secret, more praise and imparted wisdom from a godlike figure, a deliberate diabolical depression of grooming and submission for his pleasure and release. Even if I resisted, I was no match for him. I felt powerless, ashamed, and embarrassed. I wanted to vomit remembering these moments. What I learned in those depraved sessions, staring up at the dome ceiling in his private massage room, tore a violent hole through any normal sexual awakening. I'm haunted forever, having learned everything there is to know about sex to a vile criminal. Every time a new molestation would bring a new lesson, the progressive and constant unwinding, I was nothing more than a teenage prostitute. I was his slave. I had never even kissed a boy before I met him, and never throughout the horrific abuse did Jeffrey Epstein kiss me even once. When he stole my virginity, he washed my entire body compulsively in the shower and then told me, "If you're not a virgin, I will kill you." And then I wasn't a virgin anymore. What? He forcefully penetrated me. I was numb. There was pain, but his use of the vibrator, his fingers in previous sessions with me had left a black hole like void between my legs. I protested, but he forced my face into the bed to stifle my cries, and that was my first time. Ugh, y'all, this is so gross. Mm-mm. I got a few $100s as usual as he led me out of his mansion with assurances that I was on the right path guided by him. I lied to myself and tried to believe him. I became a hollow shell. If I missed an appointment, he threatened me and let me know he was in charge. Do you know how important my time is? I'll bury you. I owe this. I won't say the word F in town. He would hang up. I would stand there frozen in the street, terrified that his assistant would call to reschedule. I made sure to stay in line and not disobey him. I was in a complete denial. Being paid after every scheduled meeting felt routine and disgusting. He was the master of the universe and world bent to his will. He would eventually brag to his assistants about my ability to please him sexually right in front of me, leaving me feeling grotesque and worthless. Everything in my outside life was falling apart. I distanced myself from friends and grew further away from my family. I felt less human after each ordeal. My psyche broke down completely and wouldn't let me continue. One day I walked out of his residence and passed a girl similar to myself. When I turned around, she was entering Jeffrey's residence. He no longer even tried to schedule his appointments with other girls in secrecy from me. Maybe he never did. I was too stupid to see. My world shattered. I'd been so naive. I had an epiphany in a cavalry of desperation. I realized I was just one of many young girls he had in rotation come to perform for him for money. I went into a deep depression and never lifted completely. I wanted to inflict pain on myself. I was humiliated, angry, and suicidal. I locked myself away from everything. I cut myself off forever from the world I had known. I endured the daily agony of knowing my life would never be the same. I could never go back to New York City and the wonderful life I had taken for granted before I met this demon named Jeffrey Epstein. This creature had manipulated and outwitted the whole system, including some of the most intelligent scientists, political people, prosecutors, and power players. How easy was it to manipulate a 16-year-old virgin who never had a boyfriend and came from a background of hardship with no parental guidance or support? I went to therapy and was given antidepressants for severe anxiety and depression. My only solace years later was my desire to succeed on my own terms. I immersed myself into my studies and was accepted to every college I applied to, graduating from a top university. To this day, there's still an ache in my being that I did not apply to Harvard in fear of his influence there. They say you never forget your first. I'm in a never ending nightmare trying to do just that. I'm forever suffering because everything reminds me of that horror. This new wave of worldwide publicity only worsens my despair. It was only many years later that I was finally intimate with the man again, and those moments were marred by my actions as a child with Jeffrey Epstein. Even now, is it possible to separate his treachery from any care of a good man? For one brief moment, there was elation when he was recently arrested. I would finally get my chance to see him again face to face and show him what I had become, that I had succeeded on my own, that I was worth something in spite of his abuse, and that I had surmounted the monumental obstacles he laid before me throughout my entire life since falling prey to him. I had hoped humanity would prevail, but it seems to me that he outsmarted everyone so far, and his ghost is still laughing at us. I appeal to all those just and true that his evil legacy and his death not stand in the way of resolution and justice for all his underage victims. Thank you, Your Honor. And then just one last one, and this is much shorter. Statement of Jane Doe, also my client. I was a model in another country. When I came to the United States, I was told by a booker that I needed to meet with a man named Jeffrey Epstein, who was the owner of Victoria's Secret. The booker told me that Mr. Epstein could help me get into Victoria's Secret's world. It was my childhood dream to be a Victoria's Secret model, so I went one day in the afternoon and I met Mr. Epstein in his office in his mansion in New York. A woman introduced herself and suggested to me that I should be extremely nice to Mr. Epstein because if he liked me, he would probably have photographers shooting photos of me right away. They told me to go upstairs and directed me to Jeffrey Epstein's office. Mr. Epstein had a white robe on, and we chatted very briefly. I had my portfolio of photos, but he didn't even look at it. Suddenly, he took his robe off and got close to me. I got up to leave, but the door was locked. I didn't know what was going on. It was my first official meeting to be cast in the United States. I was a young girl and confused. He got very close to me, and I had a skirt on. He started to touch my genitals. I refused him. Then he went to massage table and showed me the vibrator. I took it and threw it at him. At that point, I ran to the door again and figured out how to get out of there. A girl outside asked me where I was going, and she said to be careful. She said that Mr. Epstein knew a lot of powerful people, including Bill Clinton, and that if I didn't do what Mr. Epstein wanted, I would not be able to have any job in the industry. I was so scared. I couldn't wait to get out of there, and I left. I took the train home. I spent all my savings getting Victoria's Secret lingerie to prepare for what I thought would be my audition, but instead it seemed like a casting call for prostitution. I felt like I was in hell. And thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. The court, thank you, Miss Allred. Was there anybody else, any victims' counsel, or any other victims who have not been heard and wish to be heard? Well, okay then. All I have to say really is thank you all of you, for your participation in today's remarkable hearing. I think everybody has benefited greatly from your input, and especially from the testimony of victims here today and who have had the courage to come forward. We've also benefited throughout these proceedings, however brief altogether, from the attorney's legal advocacy and their written and oral submissions. I'm grateful to them as well, both for the government and the defense and those representing the victims. Finally, we're also grateful to the press for their very diligent coverage of seemingly every detail of this case. That concludes our work for today, and we stand adjourned. Thanks. That's the end of that. I feel so dirty and cheap now. I'm just saying. After hearing what he did to those girls, that's horrible. But I mean, my whole point for doing the videos is I don't want this to die, that they should still get some type of justice off of this. And whatever they're doing with all these stupid videos and all that stuff, it needs to come out. I mean, you can blur out the victims. Nobody's asking you to put child porn out there. Just duh. Anyway, that's, like I said, that's the end of this dismissal thing. I guess they had no choice but to dismiss it, but anybody else that was involved should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Anyway, I'll talk to y'all later. Have a good one. Bye.